Greetings and thank you for joining us for the College Career and Military Readiness presentation on college admissions and placement testing. What is college admissions and placement testing? College admissions testing is the assessment the student takes in order to be admitted to the university. This typically only applies to four-year colleges. The two main types of college admissions testing are the ACT and the SAT. Please know that more than 2,000 universities have implemented a test optional admissions policy for the class of 2021. Many of these universities will also have a test optional admissions policy for students in the class of 22. College placement testing is different than college admissions testing. Placement testing determines the student's eligibility to enroll in college-level coursework. In Texas, if the student scores high enough on the ACT or the SAT, then the student is exempt from the Texas College Placement Exam. If the student does not score high enough on the SAT or ACT, then the student must take the Texas Placement Exam. The Texas Placement Exam is called the Texas Success Initiative Assessment, or the TSI. In January of 21, the name will be changing to TSI2. There has been an update to the exam. The SAT versus the ACT. What's the difference? Test format. For the SAT, there are two sections. Each section is divided into two subsections. There is a reading section, a writing and language section, a math section with no calculator, a math section with a calculator, and an optional essay. For the ACT, there are four different sections: English, math, reading, and science. There is also an optional writing section. We do recommend that if you are comfortable testing and you will be doing the SAT and or ACT, then you should register for the writing section as well. There is an additional charge for the writing section. Content covered. On the SAT, students will go over reading, relevant words and context, math, grammar usage, and then the analytical writing, which is optional. On the ACT, students will go over grammar and usage, math, reading, science reasoning, and writing, which is also optional. The science test does not cover science questions in terms of, do you remember the formula for this science experiment? It is more about reading charts and graphs and being able to decipher the information needed to best answer the question based on the science chart, graph, or diagram that's on the question. Test styles. The SAT questions are evidence and contents based in an effort to focus on real-world situations and multi-step problem solving. On the ACT, the questions are straightforward. The questions may be a bit longer, but are usually less difficult to decipher. The ACT is a curriculum-based test. It's going to go over the things that the student studied while in high school. Scoring. For the SAT, the scores are 200 to 800 per section. So the student will receive a score between 200 to 800 on the math section, and the student will receive a score of between 200 and 800 on the evidence-based reading and writing section. Typically, you will hear someone say, well, I scored a 950 or I scored a 1200. That's the composite score or the added score from the math and the evidence-based reading and writing section. On the ACT, students can score between a 1 and a 36 on each section. The student is given a score for each individual section: reading, writing, or reading, math, science, and English. Then the score is added up and divided by 4 to come up with a composite score. So students will score a 23, or a 36 is the highest score. That is the average of the 4 sections. Students can choose to send their test scores to colleges at the time of registration or after the exam. If you are comfortable testing, and you will be testing, we highly recommend that you send all scores to all colleges. Difficulty levels. On the SAT, questions increase in difficulty level as the student moves through that question type in a section, except in the reading passage questions, which progress chronologically through the passage. The ACT, the difficulty level of the questions, is random throughout that section. On the math sections of the SAT and ACT. On the SAT, you're going to study arithmetic, problem solving and data analysis, heart of algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and the formulas are provided for these mathematic problems. On the ACT, you will study arithmetic, algebra 1 and algebra 2, functions, geometry, trigonometry. No formulas are provided to the students on the math section of the ACT. The most popular assessment for private schools and schools in the East and West Coasts are usually the SAT. However, every four-year college accepts the SAT. With public schools and schools in the Midwest and South, you're going to see that the ACT tends to be more popular. Again, every four-year college in the U.S. accepts the ACT. In other words, colleges do not care which test you take, they care which test you do better on. Students should always take both tests at least once and see which one the student does better on, which one is the student more comfortable with. Once you know your scores, then you will focus your attention solely on the assessment that you have the greater strengths with. Be strategic in the testing process. Colleges do not care which test you take, they care which test you do better on. It is not the name of the assessment, it is which assessment is right for you, the individual student. Colleges will accept both SAT and ACT. When are the assessments offered? The SAT is offered 8 times per year: March, May, June, August, September, October, November, and December. The ACT is offered 7 times per year: February, April, June, July, September, October, December. The current school year, they offered it more times. However, not as many students were able to take it due to COVID-19 and cancellations. We will have to wait and see what the school year 21-22 holds for us for SAT and ACT testing dates. Registration deadlines for the SAT, typical deadline is about 4 weeks before the test date. For the ACT, the typical deadline is 5 to 6 weeks before the test date. To learn more about the SAT, you're going to go to collegeboard.org. To learn more about the ACT, you will go to act.org. As we've stated, we recommend that students take both the SAT and the ACT, see which one they do better on, and then focus their attention on the test with the better score that they were more comfortable with. To compare your scores, the student is going to want to use what is called a concordance table. You can access the concordance table online. Then the student can also bring their test scores to their CCR advisor. Once the student has completed both the SAT and the ACT, the students can bring their scores to their CCR advisor for comparison. The CCR advisor will use the concordance table to let the student know which test they have scored the higher score on. For example, if a student scores a 1200 on the SAT, that is equivalent to about a 25 on the ACT. If the student scores a 26 on the ACT, that is the equivalent to about a 1240 on the SAT. So the student can bring the scores to their CCR advisor and say, excuse me, which one did I do better on? The CCR advisor will look at the scores and let the students know. So let's say that the student scored a 24 on the ACT and a 1220 on the SAT. The CCR advisor would look at the scores and say, you've done better on the SAT. If another student brought the scores to the CCR advisor and said, well, I scored a 35 on my ACT, but I scored a 1400 on my SAT, the CCR advisor would tell the student that this 35 is much higher than the 1400. Again, it's very important that if you are comfortable testing, that you take both assessments. Colleges do not care which test you take, they care which test you do better on. And students are typically better at one than they are the other. Test optional admissions policy. As we stated at the beginning of the presentation, over 2,000 universities have implemented a test optional admissions policy for the class of 21 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these colleges will remain test optionals for the class of 22. Some will not. Most colleges require the student to decide if they are going to be test optional during the application process. It is a question in the application. The student will select to send test scores or not to send test scores during the application process. Some colleges will allow the student to change their mind after they submit the admissions application on whether or not to send test scores. Some colleges will not. Some colleges will still require test scores to be considered for merit-based scholarships. The most important thing to do for the students is to make sure you are researching the information on the college's website for the schools that you are interested in. This will ensure that you have correct and up-to-date information on that university's admissions policy. Whether you are in the class of 21 or in the class of 22, it is important to make sure you are frequently checking the admissions website for the colleges that you are interested in so that you understand the process and what needs to be done. If you are comfortable testing, again, you do not have to take the SAT or ACT if you are not comfortable due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of the colleges are test optional and will remain that way. If you are comfortable testing and you are a class of 21 student, the last test date for the ACT that you should be focusing on is the February 6th test date. The April test date is a little late in the admissions process, so the February 6th test date will be the next one that you need to take. For class of 22, if you did not take the test in December, then you would want to take the February 6th test also. Typically, the goal for juniors is to be done with your SAT and ACT testing by June of junior year. So if you have not already started the testing process, we would recommend that you take the February 6, 21 assessment. Again, this is only if you are comfortable with SAT and ACT testing. Class of 22, please save the date. March the 3rd, 2021, Kempner High School will be offering the SAT school day to all juniors. This is only for the class of 22. This is not for the class of 21 or the class of 23. Class of 22 juniors have the option to take the SAT school day on March the 3rd. Face-to-face juniors will automatically be registered for the test. All online juniors will be required to opt in. Opt-in will open in January of 21. Students do not register for the March 3rd SAT school day in their College Board account. Kempner will complete the registration process for you. What this means is that there is a March test date for the class for next semester. If you are a junior, class of 22, do not register for the March test date because all of you have the opportunity to take the SAT on March the 3rd for free. So if you are a class of 21, the last test date you should be focusing on for the SAT is going to be the March 13th test date. If you are a class of 22, do not register for the March 13th test date because you have the opportunity to take the SAT on SAT school day for free on March the 3rd. It's only 10 days difference, so there's really not a point in you registering for the March 13th test date. Class of 21 students, if you're still wanting to do the SAT, the March test date is the last date you should take the test. If you qualify for free or reduced lunch, you can register for the SAT and ACT for free. You can find the fee waiver request form in Naviance under View All from My School under Links. You must be a junior or a senior to request a fee waiver. SAT and ACT exam registration fee waivers. If the student is on free or reduced lunch at the time that they took the PSAT during junior year, the student will not need an SAT fee waiver code. The student will be able to accept his or her benefits in the College Board account. Once the student has accepted the benefits in the College Board account, then the student will be able to register for the SAT for free. Kempner High School has already uploaded the SAT fee waivers for the students in the class of 21 that were on free or reduced lunch when they took the PSAT during October of 2019. For our current juniors, your SAT fee waiver codes for the students that are on free or reduced lunch have not been uploaded yet. For the students that took the PSAT in October, your fee waiver should be uploaded sometime in December. For the juniors who plan to take the PSAT in January, your fee waiver codes will be uploaded after you take the test in January. If the student was not on free or reduced lunch at the time they took the PSAT during junior year, but the student is now on free or reduced lunch, then those students will need to request a fee waiver. If you're a class of 22 student and you did not take the PSAT in October and you will not take it in January, but you are on free or reduced lunch, you will also have to request your fee waiver because you didn't take the PSAT, so we have not uploaded your fee waivers for you. When a student requests a fee waiver for the SAT, they are issued one fee waiver code. That one fee waiver code is good for 2 registrations. So for the SAT, the students can take the test up to twice for free. If the student receives a code, they will receive one code, and that code will be good for 2 registrations. All students that qualify for free or reduced lunch that plan to take the ACT and would like a fee waiver must request the ACT fee waiver. Students may receive up to 4 ACT fee waivers. The student must request the fee waiver each time she or he plans to register for the exam. Students are not given all 4 fee waivers at one time. You must request it each time you want a fee waiver. Again, fee waivers can only be issued to juniors and seniors. Sending test scores to colleges. For both the SAT and the ACT, you can send your test scores for free to the colleges if you select them during the registration process. You actually have 9 days after you take the test to add the colleges for free. If you do not add colleges within the 9 days, you will be charged to send your test scores. So you can send scores for free when you register for the test, or you can add the schools within the first 9 days to still send them for free. Any schools added after the 9th day that you have taken the test, you will be charged to send the scores. The SAT charges $12 per school, and the ACT charges $13 for the score sends. So these fees do add up. If you do not have additional free score sends and you are planning on sending your scores to colleges, then we do recommend that you add the schools during the registration process or within the first 9 days after taking the exam. If you have registered for the SAT using a fee waiver or the ACT using a fee waiver, then you actually have unlimited free score sends. You can select as many schools that you would like to send your scores for free. The 9-day rule does not apply to you. The 9-day rule only applies to students who did not register using a fee waiver. Remember, colleges do not review your application until all required documents have been received. So if test scores are required for your application, so if when you submitted the application you checked yes, you will be sending in test scores, they are going to be considered required. Your application cannot be reviewed until all required documents have been received. So make sure you're sending your items in a timely manner. During the application review process, the university will only look at your highest test scores. Always send all scores. Also, some schools super score. A school cannot superscore if you do not send all of your scores. Superscoring is when the college takes the best section score from each time you took the test and creates a new score. So let's say you've taken the SAT twice. The first time on the evidence-based reading and writing section, you scored a 580, and the second time your score went down to a 530. But when you took the math section, the first time you took a math section, you scored a 530, and the second time you scored a 600. So when you send all scores, the school, if they superscore, will use your 580 from your evidence-based reading and writing section, and then they will use the 600 from your math section to create a whole new super score. If you are considering applying to a college test optional, we do recommend that you wait to send your scores. Some colleges will use the scores if they receive them. No matter what, if the school receives your scores, they are going to mark you as sending in test scores. Some schools will not. Some schools, if you send them scores, they're not going to look at the scores unless you say, yes, please review these scores. It depends on the university. Again, please make sure you are researching the colleges you are interested in before you test and before you do anything. It is your responsibility to know what that college is expecting out of its applicants. If you wait to send your test scores, please be aware of the deadlines for admissions for that school. When you request your test scores through the testing agency to be sent to the college or university, it can easily take 1 month for the college to receive those scores. So if there is an admissions deadline that you are trying to meet, be sure to send your scores at least 1 month in advance. For example, if you're trying to meet a November 1st deadline, then you need to make sure you have sent your SAT or ACT scores to that college no later than October 1st, because it takes about a month. If your test scores are received on November the 5th, you just got denied by that university because you missed a deadline. The deadline is not the last day to submit the application. The deadline is the last day that colleges will accept documents on your behalf. Your test score is part of that document. ACT review. The ACT is a curriculum-based test. You should always register for the ACT with writing. The cost is about $70. If you are on free or reduced lunch, then you can receive up to 4 ACT fee waivers. Remember, you must be a junior or a senior to receive fee waivers. Students who use a fee waiver to register for the exam receive access to 2 free online practice programs. This is a $218 value. You register at actstudent.org. An update for the school year 21 to 22. The ACT retesting policy should be updated for the school year 21-22. It was actually supposed to be implemented for this current school year, but due to COVID-19, they've pushed the implementation date back. Students, when retesting, will be able to select which sections of the ACT that they retest in. You will not be required to retest in all 4 sections. If you only want to take the English section again, then you only take the English section, so on and so forth. SAT review. The SAT predicts what a student can learn. Always register for the SAT with essay. The cost is $68. If you are on free or reduced lunch, then you can request up to 2 fee waivers. Again, you must be a junior to receive a fee waiver. All students have access to free individualized tutorial program through Khan Academy. The instructions on how to link your Khan Academy will be gone over in a few minutes. Final thoughts. Colleges do not care which test you take, they only care which test you do better on. Students should take both tests, compare the scores, do extra prep for only the test with the better score, and retest only in that test, not both. ACT and SAT are different types of tests. Students are typically better at one than they are the other. Students should focus on their strengths and not the name of the test. How to prepare. The SAT students want to use the Khan Academy. Khan Academy is the official SAT practice program. It is free for all students. It is the only recommended and endorsed practice program by the SAT. And it has individualized tutorial programs for most high school courses and for most all AP courses. Why should you link your Khan Academy and College Board account? Linking your accounts will further personalize your practice. The practice recommendations on Khan Academy will be based on your PSAT results. All future scores for the SAT, PSAT, PSAT 10, or PSAT 8-9 will also be sent to help utilize your practice and make recommendations for you on Khan Academy. You'll be able to jump right into practice without having to take any additional diagnostic quizzes or practice tests to get personalized tutorial programs. To link your College Board and Khan Academy account, make sure that you have created both accounts. You're going to go into Khan Academy, go to practice. You're going to click on the practice link. It will take you to your College Board site. You'll log into your College Board account. It's going to ask you if you want to send your scores, and you're going to send your scores, and then magic will happen and your personalized tutorial program will be available. How to study for the ACT. ACT Academy. ACT Academy is free, just like Khan Academy. Students will use the ACT Academy to practice for the ACT. All you do is create your ACT Academy account. There are quizzes the students can take. The system will track the students' scores and provide additional practice areas to help the students. The students should check in daily and follow the recommended steps for improvement. Students using a fee waiver to register for the ACT receive $218 worth of free test prep material. Students receive the ACT Online Prep Program for free, and also ACT Kaplan Online Prep Live. Once registration is complete, the student will receive instructions from ACT on how to access their ACT Online Prep Program. Once the student has completed their first diagnostics exam in ACT Online Prep, they will then receive access to their ACT Online Kaplan program. This is a great opportunity for students to utilize during the preparation period for the ACT. Students with disabilities. Students with disabilities do qualify for accommodations for the SAT and ACT. The student must have a documented disability through Kempner High School. You must work with your Kempner High School guidance counselor to ensure these accommodations are put in place for SAT and ACT testing. You should probably start the semester before you take the exam to ensure you know what you need to do to have accommodations put in place. The most common accommodations are extended time, extra and extended breaks, reading and seeing accommodations. You must receive an accommodations code to register for the exam. No code, no accommodations. SAT and ACT exams are never modified. They can only be accommodated. For the class of 22, if you are taking the SAT school day on March the 3rd, the deadline for accommodations for SAT school day is January 12th. You will receive additional information on instructions you will need to follow to have accommodations put in place for SAT school day. ACT accommodation deadlines. The ACT accommodation deadlines is the last day to register for the exam. So the late registration deadline is also the accommodations deadline for the ACT. The SAT accommodations deadline is usually about 6 weeks before the exam. So for example, if you're taking the March 13th SAT, the deadline for accommodations is January 22nd. If you are taking the AP exams in May, the deadline is also in January. The TSI Assessment. What is the TSI Assessment? The Texas Success Initiative. It is the Texas placement exam for college level courses. Unless the student is exempt, all students entering a Texas public college or university must take the TSI assessment and meet or exceed the minimum college readiness benchmarks to enroll in entry-level college credit courses. For example, English 1301 and college algebra. If the student does not meet the required benchmarks, the student cannot enroll in a college credit course. The TSI has 3 sections: reading, writing, and math. The TSI assessment will be changing to the TSI II in January 21. So our seniors who will be taking the TSI next semester, you will be taking the TSI II. There are 2 sections on the TSI II instead of 3. There is an English Language Arts Reading, ELAR, and Math. A student may be exempt from the TSI II based on his or her SAT or ACT scores, or a combination of both. When should you take the TSI II? Fort Bend ISD seniors will have the opportunity to take the TSI II at their home campus for free. A student may retake the TSI II at any time to determine the student's readiness to enroll in entry-level college credit coursework. It is highly recommended that students engage in some sort of intervention before retesting. If the student does not retake the TSI II and meet the needed benchmark, the student may be required to enroll in remedial level courses at the college or university. Remedial level courses cost the same as college level courses, but the student does not receive credit for these courses. Some colleges may allow the student to enroll in pre-college English and college English at the same time. The pre-college English class would be used as a support course for the college English course. Same thing applies for mathematics. Just depends on the college or university. Spring TSI II dates are tentatively February 19th and 20th for seniors, March 30th and 31st for seniors, April 16th for juniors and seniors who have not passed Algebra 1 EOC or the English 1 or English 2 EOC, and any future dual credit students who are not already considered TSI exempt. The first week of June, we will hopefully also have a TSI testing date for seniors. This is all tentative and dependent upon the Fort Bend ISD COVID response protocols. TSI exemption policies. If a student has already taken the SAT, a student may be exempt from the TSI if they received a 480 on the evidence-based reading and writing section, and then a math score of a 530. Students don't have to meet both. It can be one or the other. To be considered TSI exempt for ACT, the student needs a composite score of a 23 and at least a 19 on the math section, and then at least a 19 on the English section. A student can be considered TSI exempt based on the SAT, evidence-based reading and writing scores, and then on the math ACT scores. TSI II scores are different than TSI 1. On the TSIA, there are 3 sections: reading, writing, and mathematics. So for reading, you had to score a 351. On the writing, you needed a 340 on the multiple choice section of writing and a 4 on the essay. And then on the math, you needed at least a 350. On the TSIA 2, it will be ELAR. To meet the college level score on the ELAR, the student would need to score a 945 or better, and then the student would need an essay score of a 5. If a student scores between a 910 to a 944, but receives a diagnostic score level of a 5 or a 6, and still receives an essay score of a 5 or a 6, then the student will be considered college level ready. On the current TSI, the student cannot be considered college level ready if they go into the diagnostics on the reading section. On the math section, college level score will be a 950. Or if the student scores between a 910 and a 949, and on the diagnostic section they score a 6, then they can be considered college level ready. So again, previously, if the student went to the diagnostics, the student could not be considered college level ready. On the new TSIA 2, if the student goes into diagnostics, they can be considered TSIA complete and go straight into the college level courses. How many times can a student take the TSIA 2? The student can technically take the TSI as many times as they wish. However, the student needs to make sure that they are properly preparing for the TSIA 2 before they do retest. If the student does not meet the TSI standards and they would like to take it from the college or university, the college will charge between $29 to $50 depending on the school. What does the ELAR section of the TSI2 cover? There are going to be two distinct sections with multiple choice questions on the TSIA ELAR section, reading and writing multiple choice questions. There is a total of 30 multiple choice questions on the ELAR section. Then you have the separate essay. So you have reading focused questions, writing focused questions, and you have an essay that you will have to complete. The reading focused questions are literary text analysis and informational text analysis and synthesis. The writing focused questions are essay revision and editing, sentence revision, editing, and completion. The essay, you would need to make sure you write between 450 to 500 words to ensure that you score a 5. If a student writes the best, most wonderful 300-word essay they've ever written before, they still will not receive a college level score. You have to make sure you are writing enough. If a student does not do well enough on the first 30 questions, they will then go into the diagnostic section. There are 48 questions on the diagnostic section. You will score a level 2 to 6. In the diagnostic section, there's text analysis and synthesis questions and content revision and editing questions. The math section of the TSIA has 20 questions. Those 20 questions will be quantitative reasoning, algebraic reasoning, geometric and spatial reasoning, probabilistic and statistical reasoning. If a student scores well on the first 20 questions, that's all the student will receive. If the student goes into the diagnostics section, there will be 48 additional multiple choice questions that will go over the same type of information. There is a built-in calculator on the TSIA2. If the computer believes that the student would need a calculator on the test, then the test will show a calculator icon that the student can click on to use for that question. Students really need to make sure that they are using the calculator on the test. How long is the TSIA2? The TSIA2 is a computer-based exam. It is not a paper exam. The TSIA2 is an adaptive assessment, meaning the better you do on the exam, the less questions you will have. For example, if you rock the first 30 questions on the ELAR section, then you will have only those 30 questions plus the essay. If you struggle on the first 30 questions, then you will also receive the diagnostic questions. If you rock the first 20 questions on the math section, then all you will have are those 20 questions. If you struggle on the first 20 questions, then you will move into the diagnostics and receive the additional 48 questions. The TSIA2 is untimed. Students receive as much time as they need. Technically, you will have 3 days to complete the exam. If you're rocking the assessment, it typically takes about 2.5 to 3 hours. If the student moves into the diagnostics, then it would probably take about 5 hours. Students are able to break for lunch if that is needed. Accommodations. Well, every student receives the accommodations of unlimited time because the test is untimed. Again, technically the student has 3 days to complete the test. There is also a built-in accessibility wizard, which allows students to adjust the font size, the font type, and the background or foreground colors. If a student qualifies for additional accommodations, then the student and the campus will work with the local community colleges for testing purposes to have additional accommodations implemented for that student. It would require the student submit the admissions application for that community college. How can a student prepare for the TSIA2? The student goes to the student portal. The student would then click on Texas Resources, and under Texas Resources, the student would be able to define the TSIA2, look at TSIA resources, view brochures, sample questions, and the study app. There is a new study program that will be launched in January of 21. Right now, there is a similar app. It's not quite as expansive as what it will be once the new one is released in January. But you really need to make sure you are using this to study. When to send test scores to colleges, students can select up to 3 colleges to send their TSIA scores to during the proctor instruction section before starting the exam. If the student does not send the test scores to the colleges during the proctor instruction section before the exam starts, the student will be able to send the scores later on. Students can log into their student portal by going to the student portal website, click on your AccuPlacer score report, enter your information, and then you will be able to select the schools you want your scores sent to. When it asks for a test center, the test center is always Fort Bend ISD. The test center is not your high school campus. It is always Fort Bend ISD. Thank you for joining us this evening. We encourage you to check out the CCR Center YouTube channel for additional videos and tutorials on the college application process, SAT, ACT testing, TSI testing, and how-to tutorials for Naviance.